Several of you have asked me, how do you join your granny squares when you only do a chain one in the corner? So let me show you real quick. And just like the last tutorial I had where I showed you how to do the slip stitch from behind, you're going to take your right sides and you're going to sandwich them together. So your wrong side is facing out. And take your yarn. I am using a contrasting color so you can see it when we're done. Get your slip knot. And then on these, we are going to begin on the chain one in that corner. And we're going to go through the top loop of that chain one. And we're going to insert the hook into the corresponding chain one on the other square through the top loop. We're going to slip stitch that together. And then like on my other tutorial, so if you haven't seen it, please go back and refer to that. You're going to slip stitch through the back loops of the corresponding edges. And you're going to see, you're going to slip stitch across. So the front square, this is the back loop if it's facing correctly. Then go through the back loop of the other square and slip stitch that together. So we're only going to go through the back loops of the square. Okay, here's the last double crochet along the top, and then we're left with a chain one in the corner. I'm going to go ahead once again and do a slip stitch through the top loop of that chain one and slip stitch into the top loop of that chain one on the corresponding square. And this is what you have so far. And now we're going to attach the next two squares. So you're going to take these. This is the right sides. You're going to put them facing together. So you got the wrong sides facing out. You're going to pick up your hook. And you're going to start to the top of the loop of that chain one in the corner. Insert into the top loop of that chain one in the corresponding color. In the corresponding square. And you're going to slip stitch that together. And then you're going to continue down the square just like you did on the other one. Slip stitching through the back loops only on the squares. Notice when I say back loop, I'm referring to this loop here, the front square. The loop is going to be closest to me because when you look at it right side, it's the back loop of that square. I don't want to confuse you. And we're going to insert into the back loop of that, as I mentioned before, the corresponding square. Okay, and here's the end. There's the chain one. Let me go into the top of that loop and into the top loop of the other chain one. Okay, let's see what we have so far. So that's what it looks like so far. Now we're going to turn over and we're going to go across. So I'm going to fold this down. And I'm going to get some more yarn and I'll start across here. Okay, so I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to do another slip knot. This is a new piece of working yarn, by the way. And just like what we did before, we're going to find that chain 1, and we're going to insert to the top loop of that chain 1 and into the corresponding top loop of the other chain 1. Let's do our slip stitch. And once again, we're going through the back loop of both squares and doing a slip stitch. So I'm going to go across the top here, and then I'll show you what we do when we meet in the middle. Okay, so here's the last stitch. Now we're at the corner. So you have two options. You can either do the corner, slip stitch the corners together again, go through both of those corner loops, slip stitch it, and then jumping over into the corner on the other pair and slip stitching that. Problem with this though, just keep in mind, it might make it look pretty bulky in the center. So another option you could do, instead of slip stitching into the corners again, I just jump past the corner, but I make sure the stitch is pretty loose, and I go straight into the back loops of the stitches. And remember, we'll keep this loose. Like that. And then I continue. And you want to make sure when you're doing a slip stitch on the back side like this, you don't want to be too tight. You want to keep your slip stitches pretty loose so your squares don't pucker. All right, let's do the last two, and then I can show you what it looks like. Here's a chain, and going into that chain. Okay, and here you have it. That's what it looks like. So it looks pretty good, doesn't it? You don't really see the slip stitch unless you pull it tight, and then you have to really pull it. So if you happen to slip stitch it together in corresponding colors, you're really not going to see that. So don't forget to add this to your favorites, and if you haven't already, give me a follow, and I will see you on my next video.